Welcome to Road to Recovery.
Hey there, and welcome to Road to Recovery, advocacy and insights for trucking accidents with Sagi Shaked. Sagi is founder of Shaked Law Personal Injury Lawyers and is ranked as one of the top 100 trial lawyers in the United States by the American Trial Lawyers Association. He has a wealth of experience in personal injury, wrongful death, and complex litigation cases, and he passionately advocates for victims and has recovered multi-million-dollar settlements in damages for his clients. My name is Kevin Rosenquist. Today we're going to talk about trucking accidents involving road construction zones, legal traps, and who's responsible. Sagi, welcome back. It's great to see you.
Yeah, good seeing you, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
So why are construction zones so dangerous for trucks and passenger vehicles alike?
So construction zones are inherently chaotic, and you can have many different issues. So sometimes you have narrowed lanes or sudden stops or uneven pavement, workers close to the traffic, so workers can get hurt. So it really requires a lot of attention and planning ahead of time for trucks to be able to avoid colliding, even for cars. So they really have to plan ahead of time. You have issues with braking distance, people having to maneuver last minute or hard maneuvers can cause collisions. And then you add to that, we know we've talked about, distracted driving before, or if the signage is unclear, all that leads to a perfect storm for serious, collisions and really bad injuries from those collisions.
Yeah, and when it comes to the signage, or maybe we've all seen those weird lane shifts where you're just kind of like, where am I supposed to go? And it can really be difficult, even just in a regular old small car. I mean, I can't even imagine it in a truck. Who's responsible when signage or some of these confusing lane shifts cause a trucking accident?
Initially, you could always look to the trucking company, but sometimes it's not the trucking companies at fault. It could be the construction company. So you would have the general contractor, the person who made the bid with the county or the state for that specific contract. So you always want to get the bids when you're doing this to figure out, what did they say they were going to do? And are they complying with what they told the county or the state or the city on what they're going to do? So you want to look for missing signs or misleading signs or non-compliant regulations. And you can look again at the person who's the general contractor. Usually they have a safety division. When you're talking about major roadways, they'll have someone who's designed or specifically designs the safety protocols or the traffic safety protocols. So you want that person. If it's a subcontractor, that may be a person who the injured victim or the family can go after. It just really depends on what the scenario is. So usually you're looking at the construction company, any safety engineers that are separate and apart from the construction company, and any traffic control person or entity that was responsible for setting up the safety of traffic flow at that time.
Is it possible that a victim could sue both the trucking company and the traffic person, as you just said, or the construction company?
Yeah, you definitely could. We've had cases where our client was on a motorcycle riding, and the signage was really confusing, and so we hired a what do they call them? A manual on uniform traffic control device expert who went to the scene. Now, by the time we got to the scene, it was weeks later, but still had pictures from and videos from the officers who investigated the homicide in that scenario. And they can tell that the way the flow of traffic went, and this was on I-95, which in Florida is one of our major highways, the way the flow of traffic went led drivers, in this case my client, to be really confused about what happened. So my client was on a motorcycle and he ran into the back of a truck that was replacing the reflectors in the roadway. You know how you have in between lanes, there's reflectors to make sure at nighttime you know where you're going?
Yeah.
So that's what they were doing, but the design was defective and my client got confused. And when you're going 65 miles an hour and you need to make a decision, you really shouldn't have a choice of whether to go left or right. They should just lead you all one way. So there's no decisions to make or last minute decisions. He's not a race car driver or a motorcycle expert. He's just riding his motorcycle. So that case eventually resolved, but the issue in that case was the way they set up the safety planning in that one was negligent.
When it comes to the legal aspects of that, like are there legal duties that people like that, these construction companies or the people working on the road putting down those reflectors, is there a legal duty that they have to ensure safety for drivers?
Yeah, that's a great question because you do have federal and state regulations. And on the state side, you have the manual on uniform traffic control devices and what they're supposed to do when you have construction. So it lays out what you're supposed to do. And then going back to what I said earlier, the bid that the individual contracting company will make will lay out what safety precautions they're going to make and what rules and regulations and state laws they're going to follow. And they always say they're going to follow what they call the MUTCD, the Manual Uniform on Traffic Control Devices and on Safety Planning. So that's critical. If they violate that, they're in big trouble. We have a case going on right now where our client's driving on I-95, minding his own business on the way to pick up his girlfriend from the airport. And as they're driving in this construction site on the highway, they decide to move one of these big, monstrous crane trucks. And without having any type of spotter, without having any type of warning to oncoming motorists. So you can imagine my client's driving 65 miles an hour at nighttime. No one's telling him that this crane of the monstrosity of a crane truck is moving. And as it's moving slowly on the highway, my client just smashes right into it because no one had warned them that they're having a vehicle that moves 10 miles an hour on a major roadway. So it can happen. And if they don't follow that specific manual on uniform traffic control devices, they're going to be on the hook.
What are just some of the most common types of accidents you see when involving construction zones?
Yeah, there's a couple that are more common than others. The sudden lane change with little warning that we talked about with the motorcycle rider, where they're just not giving you enough notice. A lot of times you'll see now construction companies, we see this a lot. They make mistakes at nighttime. In the daytime, they do perfectly, but at nighttime, they may not have the markings up or the markings are not lit up so where people can get an understanding of what's really going on. So a lot of it is providing notice to the people that are driving on the roadways, whether it's unmarked zones at night. A lot of times you have uneven, this is another typical one where you have uneven surfaces or abrupt pavement stops. So that happens. And when you're talking about drivers of trucks or individual drivers, people get distracted. So if you don't have specifically signs out on the roadway telling them where to go, this can cause a major collision. So merging signs, merging space, there's sometimes not enough or an abrupt lane change. That's a design defect on the part of the construction company that not designing the alternate roadway. So, and then having construction vehicles in the street or on the roadway where they shouldn't be without having enough warning. We see people smashing into those where they're just left there and they really shouldn't be there because, as we know from doing our other episodes, remember we had a trial where our client ran into the back of a truck because they didn't have the proper warning devices laid out. Those warning devices have been studied. You see the flares or the triangles. They're supposed to be out there because people do run into the back of the trucks when they think the trucks are moving and they're really not. Mm-hmm. So this happens in construction sites as well.
You mentioned the uneven lanes. That can be really jarring if you don't realize that it's there. I mean, you're driving along, you're in a construction zone, you're paying attention, but if there's no sign and you just kind of move over and you're like, whoa, like it can be very jarring even in a passenger vehicle. So I can't even imagine.
Yeah, you have to be on at all times.
Yeah,
especially in a construction site. We all think that they're doing the right thing, and most of them are, but a lot of times they don't. And you can have one person who's having a bad day and not set up the site properly, and then a person becomes trapped in what is a death trap in some of these situations.
How does this affect liability? I mean, we've talked numerous times about how insurance companies don't like to pay out. So when they're always trying to shift liability, always trying to shift blame, how does it shift when road markings or barriers are inadequate? Because that adds a lot of moving parts to it, huh?
Yeah, it really does. And the construction companies, obviously, they always try to blame the driver,
Sure.
the person who's driving. Hey, you didn't pay attention to the roadway signs. You didn't pay attention to our advanced warnings. And the problem is sometimes there are no advanced warnings, like we talked about that big crane on the highway. My client didn't have any advanced warnings that they were going to move a crane in the middle of the night or when it's pitch dark at 10 miles an hour. So you can go against the trucking company, you can go against the construction company, you can go against the individuals or companies that set up the safety protocols or violated the safety protocols. So there could be liability on the car, the truck, the construction company as well.
Another thing that we've talked a lot about in this podcast is documentation, getting the evidence. That's something that you're always very, very emphatic about, that people need to make sure they get as much as they as humanly possible. Obviously, construction zones kind of chaotic a lot of times. It's not as clear cut. It's harder to maybe see skid marks, that kind of stuff. What type of evidence really needs to be preserved in these cases, and how might it differ from your standard, accident scene where you would be getting evidence from?
Yeah, so it is a little different because construction companies, again, have a lot of papers, a lot of contracts. But more importantly, what we're seeing now more and more of is you see in construction companies, they have cameras on site, cameras on the trucks, cameras on the locations. And so because one, they're trying to prevent, claims, but at the same time, when they have those cameras, they're also, noting what's going on and recording what's going on. And if there's a record of it, you want to make sure, like we talked about over and over again, you got to preserve the evidence. So any cameras on site, any witnesses on site, any dash cam, any street cams that may be available, you want to get the black box data from your client's car. And if there's a truck involved or another crane, like in my case, you want to get the black box data. You want to get to that scene sooner rather than later to take pictures of the construction site, to see what's going on, the layout of the roadway. You want the maintenance logs, the site logs, any experts that you want to get out to the scene. Most likely, if you're dealing with a construction site, you're going to need an accident reconstruction expert. You're going to need an expert on the manual uniform traffic control devices, someone who's worked for the state, ideally someone from the Department of Transportation or who worked for the Department of Transportation in the past. You want the 911 call logs. You want the police reports. And then if you're dealing with a truck, you want their call logs and their driver logs to see what happened there and get obviously their employment file for any employee that's on that construction site, including the truck driver. So those are some, but I think one of the most crucial pieces of evidence will be that video footage of the crash. That's going to be extremely crucial for us to help put those pieces of the puzzle together.
What about when it's city or state agencies involved? What if it's a city redoing a road or something like that? Do they get involved in these lawsuits after crashes as well, or are they usually able to deflect it onto independent contractors?
So usually the city hires, because they're not in the business of road construction.
Sure.
They'll have people on payroll that clean for the city or do some basic maintenance, but not road construction. So that's where you have the bidding process and you would go after the specific construction companies. For example, in Florida, when I have these cases in Florida, we always have a separate company to go after. It's the construction company that got the bid. You wouldn't want to go after the city per se because there are sovereign immunity caps in Florida, which are not favorable to individuals. They're favorable to the state. So not the best target for whoever's at fault. You'd want to get more of the contractor. And quite frankly, you can have the city hires someone to take care of business and fix the roadways. So the city's really not at fault. It's the construction company that's not putting the proper warning devices and letting people know about the merging lanes or the inadequate turns or when they're supposed to stop. So really not really much on the city, more on the independent construction companies who are doing the work.
Is there ever a situation where it's, the city didn't do their due diligence to find a good quality contractor where they could be liable, or does that not really happen?
That could happen, but generally speaking, the city requires in their bid that the individual construction companies have a requirement for insurance, and it's a lot of insurance depending on the size of the project. So you really won't have to go after the city. Now, again, certain states you can go after the city, and they're just as good as going after a construction company. Florida is not one of those states. I know New York, you can do that, and California, for example. But here in Florida, and some of the other states that I litigate these cases on, you're better off going against the construction company.
When someone is injured in one of these construction zone crashes, what's the first thing that you recommend they do?
First thing is, because evidence disappears fast, immediately contact a lawyer, a board certified lawyer, someone who knows what they're doing, someone who's handled these types of cases. Don't wait. The longer you wait, the more evidence disappears. And the insurance company and the construction company, they're not on your side. So they're not looking to help and preserve evidence that's favorable for you. There may be more than one party at fault. So you really need to gather the evidence and figure out who you're going to go after. Is it the construction company? Is it the engineering company? Or someone else down the road? And you want to preserve that evidence. Like the video we have of that, my client running right into that crane on the highway. We have video because there was video at the scene. So, and we got involved early on where we were able to get that video. So go to someone who has experience, who can help you out with these types of cases. That would be my main concern. Don't wait. Immediately hire someone who's actually going to do the work, not just going to sit there and wait for your case to develop. They really need to get out there and do the work.
All right, great advice as always. Well, thanks for listening to Road to Recovery. If you were injured in a truck crash inside a road construction zone, as Sagi said, don't wait. Visit shockedlaw.com to protect your rights. Also, be sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a review. We really appreciate it. Sagi, great seeing you again. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.